The gym was loud in all the usual ways: metal clanging, treadmills whining, bass-heavy music thumping through speakers that had long since given up on clarity. Mirrors lined the walls, reflecting bodies in motion, faces tight with effort or pride. It was a place built on noise, on visibility, on proving something to anyone willing to look. That was why the quiet around him felt wrong. Ethan Walker moved through the gym without headphones, without a phone, without even glancing at the mirrors. He didn't stretch theatrically or roll his shoulders like he was warming up for a show. He didn't scan the room to see who was watching. He simply walked in, nodded once at the front desk, and chose a corner rack, the one most people avoided because it sat under a flickering light. No one noticed him at first. He wore an old gray hoodie, sleeves frayed at the wrists, and plain black training shoes with soles worn thin. His build didn't scream intimidation. He wasn't massive, wasn't carved into exaggerated shapes. He looked ordinary. The kind of man people assumed they could read in a second and forget just as quickly. But the quiet followed him anyway. When Ethan loaded the bar, he did it without flair, no bouncing plates, no dramatic pauses. Just precise movements. Plate. Slide. Lock. Repeat. The bar settled with a dull, controlled clink. Not loud enough to draw attention. Not careless enough to be sloppy. A group of younger guys nearby laughed loudly, one of them glancing over at Ethan's setup. "That all he's loading?" one of them muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. Another snorted. "Probably rehab weight." They laughed again. Ethan didn't react. He stepped under the bar and closed his eyes, not in hesitation, but in calibration. His breathing slowed. Not the exaggerated inhale-exhale gym-goers practiced for show, but something deeper. Measured. Almost. Counted. 1 breath in. 2 counts hold. Controlled release. He unracked the weight. The bar moved smoothly, silently, as if gravity itself had been negotiated with ahead of time. Ethan descended into the squat with a straight back and relaxed face, knees tracking perfectly, heels rooted. No strain showed. No wasted movement. Down. Pause. Up. 1 rep. The room didn't notice the first rep. But the second rep carried something different. Not heavier weight, not louder effort, but intent. A stillness that felt out of place. A discipline that didn't belong to mirrors and music. Someone nearby stopped mid-conversation. By the 5th rep, the bar still wasn't rattling. Ethan's breathing hadn't changed. His eyes stayed unfocused, as if he wasn't in the gym at all. A trainer named Mark noticed then. Mark had been working in that gym for 7 years. He'd seen every type: ego lifters, fake naturals, loud beginners, quiet obsessives. He prided himself on reading people quickly. And something about Ethan made his instincts itch. It wasn't strength. Plenty of people were strong. It was restraint. Ethan re-racked the bar after 10 reps, stepping away calmly. No fist pump. No nod to himself in the mirror. He wiped the bar down, carefully, methodically, then sat on the bench nearby, hands resting on his thighs, breathing steady. Mark approached casually, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Hey," he said, friendly but curious. "Haven't seen you around before." Ethan looked up. His eyes were sharp, not aggressive, not cold, but alert. As if they were always measuring distance and angles, even at rest. "New schedule," Ethan replied. His voice was calm. Flat. Not unfriendly, just economical. Mark nodded. "You lifting solo today?" "Yes." Another pause. Not awkward. Intentional. Mark gestured toward the bar. "Form's solid. Where'd you learn to move like that?" Ethan's gaze shifted, not away, just slightly to the side. A habit formed long before this gym. "Old job," he said. Mark smiled. "Military." The word hung there. For the first time, something flickered across Ethan's face. Not fear. Not pride. Distance. "Something like that," he replied. Mark chuckled lightly, assuming modesty. "Well, whatever it was, it stuck. Let me know if you want a program or—" "I won't," Ethan said politely. Mark blinked, then laughed it off. "Fair enough." As Mark walked away, he glanced back once. Ethan was already standing, already moving, transitioning to the next station with the same quiet efficiency. No wasted steps. No wandering. That was when Mark noticed something else. Ethan never turned his back fully to the room. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable. But he always positioned himself where he could see the most people. Mirrors weren't for flexing, they were tools. Angles. Coverage. Mark felt a chill he couldn't explain. Across the gym, the group of younger guys had grown louder. One of them, a tall kid with oversized headphones and an even bigger ego, watched Ethan with a smirk. "Yo," he said to his friends, nodding toward Ethan. "Gray hoodie thinks he's special." Another laughed. "Bet he's one of those functional training guys." They watched as Ethan moved to the pull-up bar. No chalk. No shaking arms. He jumped lightly, caught the bar, and began. His pull-ups were different. No kipping. No swinging. Each rep paused briefly at the top, chin clearing the bar with controlled precision before lowering again. Slow, deliberate, almost clinical. 10, 12, 15. The laughter faded. At 20, Ethan dropped lightly to the floor, landing without sound. He stepped away, rolled his shoulders once, and checked his watch. Not to admire time passed. To mark it. The tall kid scoffed, louder than necessary. "That's it. 20. Ethan didn't look at him. The kid stood, emboldened. "Hey man, you training for something? Or just scared to load real weight?" The room seemed to lean in, even if no one realized it. Ethan turned slowly. Not aggressively. Not defensively. He looked at the kid the way one might look at a loose cable on the ground. Something to note, something to avoid. "I'm training to leave the same way I arrived," Ethan said evenly. The kid frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Ethan replied, voice calm, uninjured, unnoticed, and unnecessary to remember. A few people chuckled nervously, unsure why. The kid scoffed again. "Man, this is a gym. Not a movie." Ethan nodded once. "Exactly." He turned away. The kid opened his mouth to say more, but stopped. Something in Ethan's posture had changed. Not bigger. Not louder. Just ready. Whatever Ethan had learned in uniform, it wasn't about showing strength. It was about control. And the gym, loud, careless, and proud, had no idea what kind of silence it had just invited in. The mistake people often made about silence was assuming it meant absence. Ethan Walker understood silence differently. Silence was preparation. Silence was assessment. Silence was the space where decisions were made before anyone else realized a decision was even possible. After the exchange at the pull-up bar, the gym's noise returned, but it didn't fully recover. Conversations resumed, music kept thumping, weights kept dropping, yet something subtle had shifted. Like the air before a storm that never announces itself. Ethan moved to the sled track. Most people used it like a spectacle, stacking plates, grunting loudly, filming shaky clips for social media. Ethan added weight carefully, testing the resistance with his foot before committing. His hands rested on the vertical poles, fingers relaxed but firm. He didn't brace like a powerlifter. He leaned forward just enough to align force with direction. Then he pushed. The sled didn't scream across the turf. It crawled. Slow. Relentless. Each step measured, heel to toe, breath synchronized with movement. His face remained neutral, eyes fixed forward, jaw loose. 10 meters. Pause. He stepped back, circled once, checked his breathing, then pushed again. Across the gym, Mark noticed the pause. Not a rest. A reset. Mark had seen competitive athletes gas themselves chasing numbers. He'd seen soldiers too, some broken, some loud, some desperate to prove they still mattered. Ethan was none of those things. Ethan trained like someone who expected interruption. The tall kid, Ryan, according to the name stitched on his gym bag, hadn't let it go. He watched Ethan between sets, irritation building with every quiet rep. There was no obvious challenge, no direct insult, yet Ryan felt dismissed. And that, more than anything, gnawed at him. Ryan nudged his friend. "Watch this," he muttered. He walked over, clapping his hands loudly. "Yo, hoodie," he said, planting himself directly in Ethan's path. "You always train like this? Or just scared to actually test yourself?" Ethan stopped. He didn't sigh. Didn't roll his eyes. He looked at Ryan, not at his face first, but at his stance. Feet too wide. Weight uneven. Hands loose but twitchy. Ego leading posture instead of balance. Ethan spoke calmly. "You're standing in my lane." Ryan laughed. "Your lane?" "Yes. Man, this whole gym's a lane." Ethan nodded once. "That's the problem." Ryan stepped closer, voice rising. "You think you're special because you did some push-ups in uniform or—" Ethan raised a hand. Not threatening. Not abrupt. Just enough to stop momentum. "I didn't learn this to win arguments," he said. "And I didn't learn it here." A couple of nearby lifters pretended not to listen while listening very carefully. Ryan scoffed. "So what, you gonna lecture me now?" "No," Ethan replied. "I'm going to finish my set." Ryan laughed again, louder, gesturing exaggeratedly. "Go on then. Show us this secret soldier strength." Ethan stepped around him, not away, around, and placed his hands back on the sled. He didn't look at Ryan again. That was the worst part. Ethan pushed. The sled moved faster this time. Not explosively, but with authority. Each step drove through the turf, muscles working in coordinated chains rather than isolated strain. His breathing deepened, rhythm tightening, but his posture never broke. Halfway down the track, Mark felt it. That quiet again. The kind that came when something was about to happen, whether people wanted it or not. Ryan muttered something under his breath and followed alongside the track, mocking exaggerated marching steps. Left, right, soldier boy. Ethan stopped the sled. Instantly. No skidding. No stumble. He turned. Slowly. The gym seemed to hold its breath. Ethan stepped toward Ryan, closing the distance to just under an arm's length, not invading, not retreating. His voice stayed low. "Listen carefully," he said. "I don't train for dominance. I train for control. There's a difference." Ryan swallowed, then scoffed. "You threatening me?" "No," Ethan replied. "I'm explaining why this ends here." Ryan opened his mouth. And that was when Ethan shifted. It wasn't a strike. It wasn't a shove. Ethan adjusted his stance by inches. His shoulders angled slightly. His weight redistributed. To an untrained eye, nothing had changed. To Mark, it looked like a switch had been flipped. Ethan's presence sharpened. Ryan felt it too. His voice faltered. "What you?" Ethan spoke again, still calm. "If you take one more step toward me, you'll lose balance before you realize you moved. You won't be hurt. But you'll be embarrassed. And everyone here will remember that part." Ryan froze. Silence pressed in. "How would you?" Ryan started. Ethan interrupted gently. "Because you lead with your chest. Your right foot drags when you step forward. And you tense your shoulders before committing." Ryan's face drained of color. "You don't need to believe me," Ethan continued. "You just need to decide whether you want to find out." Mark stepped forward then, clearing his throat. All right. Let's cool it." Ethan stepped back immediately. Hands open. Shoulders relaxed. The switch flipped off. "I'm done," Ethan said. "No problem here." Ryan didn't reply. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched, pride shattered but intact enough to keep him silent. The gym exhaled. Ethan wiped his hands, unloaded the sled, and returned the plates neatly to their rack. He checked his watch again. He had time. But something had changed. People watched him now, not openly, but carefully. Conversations lowered when he passed. Movements paused. Not fear. Not admiration. Respect mixed with uncertainty. As Ethan headed toward the locker room, Mark caught up with him. "Hey," Mark said quietly. "You handled that well." Ethan nodded. "It didn't need handling." Mark hesitated. "You really military?" Ethan stopped at the locker room door. For a moment, his reflection in the glass overlapped with the gym behind him. Loud, bright, careless. "I wore the uniform," he said. "But what I learned wasn't about fighting." Mark waited. "It was about preventing things from becoming fights," Ethan finished. He opened the door and disappeared inside. Mark stood there longer than necessary, heart still beating faster than it should. Because he realized something unsettling. Ethan hadn't shown strength. He'd shown permission. Permission to escalate, and the discipline not to. And if someone like Ethan ever decided that control was no longer enough, the gym wouldn't stand a chance. The locker room smelled like disinfectant and old metal, clean, but tired. Ethan preferred it that way. Clean meant order. Order meant fewer surprises. He sat on the narrow bench and unlaced his shoes slowly, methodically, as if the rhythm itself mattered. Around him, lockers slammed, conversations drifted in and out, laughter rose and fell. None of it reached him. His breathing had returned to baseline within minutes, heart rate steady, hands no longer humming with readiness. But his body remembered. It always did. The moment Ryan had stepped too close, something old had surfaced. Not anger, not fear, but readiness. The kind that didn't ask permission. The kind that had been drilled into him long before mirrors and music and turf lanes. Ethan flexed his fingers once, then stilled them. Control was the lesson that mattered most. A locker creaked open nearby. A man's voice followed, older, rougher, carrying a tone Ethan hadn't heard in years. "You still unlace like you're packing for inspection." Ethan froze. Not outwardly. Not visibly. Internally. He looked up slowly. The man standing 2 lockers down was tall in the way age couldn't shrink. His hair had gone mostly gray, his shoulders slightly rounded, but his eyes, those were unmistakable. Sharp. Assessing. The eyes of someone who never stopped counting exits. "Sergeant Cole," Ethan said quietly. Cole smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Knew it was you the moment I saw that stance out there." Ethan stood. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Didn't expect to be here," Cole replied. "Life's funny that way." They regarded each other in silence, 1,000 unspoken things pressing between them. Around them, lockers slammed, towels snapped, showers hissed. None of it mattered. Cole broke the silence first. "You're still clean," he said. "Too clean." Ethan exhaled. "Some habits don't fade." "No," Cole agreed. "They just go quiet." They stepped toward the corner of a locker room, instinctively choosing a space with fewer people, more walls. Cole leaned against a locker, arms crossed. "I heard you left," Cole said. "No transfer. No ceremony. Just gone." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You know why?" Cole nodded once. "I know what they told me." "That's not the same thing." "No," Cole admitted. "It rarely is." Silence again. Heavier this time. Cole studied Ethan. "You're avoiding something," he said finally. Ethan didn't answer. "You don't come to a civilian gym and train like you're expecting trouble unless you're running from quiet," Cole continued. Ethan met his gaze. "What are you doing here, Sergeant?" Cole sighed. "I teach a seminar. Once a week. Situational awareness. De-escalation. Corporate security types, mostly." Ethan nodded. "Figures. I didn't expect to see you pushing sleds like you were clearing terrain." Ethan's mouth twitched faintly. "It helps me sleep." Cole's expression softened. "Just a fraction." "Does it?" he asked. Ethan looked away. Across the locker room, a raised voice echoed, Ryan's. "Laughing too loudly. Trying too hard." Ethan stiffened. Cole noticed immediately. "That kid." "He doesn't matter," Ethan said. "That's not what your shoulders say." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I'm fine." Cole studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "You're not here to be fine. You're here to remember how to stop being on edge without going numb." Ethan didn't respond. Cole pushed off the locker. "You know, Command asked about you last year." Ethan's head snapped up. "Why?" "Because someone flagged your name." Ethan's pulse quickened. "For what?" "For restraint," Cole said. "For walking away when others wouldn't. For shutting things down without collateral." Ethan laughed quietly. That's new. They said you were the best at ending things before they began, Cole continued. That you saw lines most people didn't. And that's why I left, Ethan said flatly. Cole tilted his head. Because you crossed one? Ethan closed his eyes. Memory surged. Too fast, too vivid. A corridor. Narrow. Poor lighting. A man's breathing too fast. A misread movement. A split-second decision. Outcome controlled. Aftermath, not. I didn't cross the line, Ethan said. I realized how close I always was. Cole nodded slowly. That awareness is what kept people alive. And it's what keeps me up at night. Cole didn't argue. From the other side of the locker room, Ryan's voice rose again. Man, that dude thinks he's some kind of operator. Laughter followed, forced, thin. Cole glanced over, then back at Ethan. You want me to talk to him? No, Ethan said immediately. You sure? Yes. Cole studied him. You're still carrying it. Ethan met his eyes. I don't know how to put it down. Cole straightened. Then maybe it's time you stopped training like you're alone. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? It means, Cole said carefully, that what you learned wasn't meant to stay locked inside you forever. It was meant to be passed on, correctly. Ethan shook his head. I'm not a teacher. Cole smiled faintly. You're wrong. They stood there, past and present colliding in a quiet civilian locker room. Outside, the gym buzzed on, unaware of the weight pressing in that small space. Finally, Ethan spoke. I can't go back. I didn't ask you to, Cole replied. I asked you to stop pretending you never belonged. Ryan's laughter cut through again, louder, sharper. Cole glanced toward the sound. Because one day, he said quietly, someone like him won't stop at words. Ethan's expression hardened, not with anger, but resolve. I know, he said. He picked up his bag and slung it over his shoulder. What happens then? Cole asked. Ethan paused at the door. Then, he said, voice steady, what I learned in uniform won't stay invisible. He stepped out. And for the first time since leaving, Ethan didn't feel like he was running. He felt like he was standing in place, braced, aware, and waiting. The parking lot was louder than the gym. Engines revved. Doors slammed. Someone laughed too hard near the entrance, the sound bouncing off concrete walls and low ceilings. Sodium lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a dull amber glow that flattened faces and stretched shadows. Ethan stepped outside and paused, not because he hesitated, but because pausing gave him information. 3 cars idling longer than necessary. One argument brewing near the far pillar. A woman standing alone near her vehicle, keys clenched between her fingers. Ryan and his friend spilling out behind him, energy high, judgment low. Patterns formed instantly. Ethan adjusted his bag on his shoulder and walked, not toward his car, but past it. He kept moving, casual, unremarkable, placing himself where lines of sight overlapped. Behind him, Ryan's voice cut through the air. Hey, Hoodie. Ethan didn't turn. Thought you were done playing soldier, Ryan called, laughter riding on adrenaline. Ethan heard the shift before he saw it, the scrape of a shoe, the change in cadence. Someone breaking from the group. A bottle shattered somewhere to the left. Ethan stopped. Slowly, deliberately, he turned. Ryan stood a few steps away, chest puffed, friends fanned out behind him like backup they didn't know how to use. One of them held a phone, already recording. This isn't inside, Ryan said. No rules out here. Ethan's eyes flicked, not to Ryan's face, but past him. The woman near her car had frozen. Her grip on her keys tightened. Walk away, Ethan said calmly. All of you. Ryan laughed. Or what? Ethan took one step forward. Just one. The laughter died. You don't want to find out, Ethan said. And neither do they. Ryan scoffed, but his feet shifted. You gonna hurt us? Over what? Respect? No, Ethan replied. Over risk. One of Ryan's friends muttered, Man, let's just go. Ryan waved him off. Relax. That was when it happened. A car door slammed hard behind Ethan. Too close. Too sudden. His body reacted before his mind finished processing. Ethan pivoted. In one fluid motion, he intercepted the movement, guiding, redirecting, unbalancing without striking. The man who had rushed forward found himself face down on the concrete, arm pinned, breath knocked out of him not by pain, but by surprise. Ethan was already kneeling, weight distributed, grip precise. "Don't move," Ethan said quietly. The parking lot went silent. Phones froze mid-record. Ryan stared, mouth open, color draining from his face. Ethan released pressure immediately and stood, stepping back, hands open. The man on the ground scrambled away, wide-eyed, scrambling on hands and knees like he'd woken from a bad dream. Ethan scanned the group. No threats advancing. No weapons visible. Adrenaline high, but control regained. "Get in your cars," Ethan said. "No." No one argued. Engines started. Doors slammed. Tires squealed. Within seconds, they were gone. Ethan exhaled slowly, letting his pulse settle. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the restraint it had taken not to escalate further. Behind him, a voice spoke. "Are you okay?" Ethan turned. The woman stood a few feet away, still gripping her keys, eyes wide. "Yes," Ethan said. "You should leave." She nodded, hesitated. "Thank you." Ethan inclined his head once. She drove off. Silence returned, heavier now. Then sirens. Not close, but approaching. Ethan's jaw tightened. He picked up his bag and walked toward his car, posture calm, movements unhurried. He had done nothing wrong. He knew that. Still, the uniform he no longer wore pressed against him like a ghost. Police lights washed the lot in red and blue as two cruisers rolled in. Officers stepped out, hands near belts, eyes scanning. "Sir," one called. "Mind stopping for a moment?" Ethan stopped. He turned slowly, hands visible. "Yes, officer." "What happened here?" Ethan answered simply. No embellishment. No bravado. Facts only. The officer listened, glancing at his partner, then back at Ethan. "Anyone hurt?" "No." "No weapons involved?" "No." The officer studied Ethan for a long moment. "You military?" Ethan hesitated. "I was," he said. The officer nodded. "Figures." They exchanged information. The officers took statements from a distance. Few witnesses remained, fewer still willing to linger. After several minutes, one officer handed Ethan back his ID. "You showed restraint," he said. "Not everyone would've." Ethan nodded. "It was necessary." The cruisers pulled away. Ethan sat in his car for a long time after that, hands resting on the steering wheel, engine off. The adrenaline drained, leaving behind something heavier. He closed his eyes. Images surfaced, not of the parking lot, but of narrow corridors, shouted commands, moments when restraint had been harder, costlier. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You okay, Cole?" Ethan stared at the screen, then typed back. "I crossed the line tonight." The reply came quickly. "No." "You held it." Ethan exhaled. Another message followed. "That's the difference." Ethan leaned back, staring up at the concrete ceiling. For years, he had believed that what he learned in uniform was dangerous outside its context, that it belonged only to controlled environments, to rules written in ink and blood. Tonight had proved something else. The danger wasn't the training. It was burying it without purpose. Ethan started the engine. As he drove away, he knew one thing with certainty. The quiet he'd been running from was over. And if what he learned was ever going to surface again, it would be on his terms. The quiet after the parking lot incident didn't feel like the quiet Ethan used to fear. It wasn't hollow. It wasn't heavy. It didn't crawl into his chest and tighten there. It felt earned. Ethan woke before sunrise the next morning, not from habit, but from clarity. The kind that arrived only after something unresolved finally settled into place. He lay still for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the city outside his apartment window, distant traffic, a delivery truck braking, a bird calling from somewhere unseen. Normal sounds. civilian sounds. And for the first time in years, they didn't clash with the rhythms still etched into his bones. He dressed simply and left without rushing. At a small cafe near the gym, he ordered black coffee and sat by the window. People passed by carrying briefcases, gym bags, groceries. No one knew what had almost happened the night before. No one needed to. That realization mattered. His phone buzzed again. Cole, Jim. Noon. My seminar. Ethan stared at the message longer than necessary. Then he replied. I'll listen. That was all. At noon, the gym's upstairs studio looked different from the night before. Bright lighting. Clean mats. Chairs arranged in a loose semicircle. About a dozen people sat waiting, security guards, corporate managers, a few trainers. Not fighters. Not soldiers. Civilians. Ethan stood near the back, arms crossed loosely, observing. Old instincts stirred, not readiness for violence, but readiness to understand. Cole stood at the front, posture relaxed, voice calm. This isn't about fighting, Cole said. If you're here for that, you're in the wrong room. A few people shifted uncomfortably. This is about recognizing moments before they turn into something else, Cole continued. Most damage happens before the first punch. Before the first shout. Ethan felt the words settle. Cole paced slowly. We're taught to react. What we're not taught is restraint. Ethan's gaze drifted to the mirrors lining the walls. For years, he'd avoided mirrors, not because of vanity, but because they reminded him of versions of himself he didn't know how to reconcile. Cole turned slightly, eyes flicking toward Ethan. Some people in this room know what it's like to carry training that doesn't switch off just because the uniform comes off. A few heads turned. Ethan didn't move. Cole continued, the mistake is thinking that means you don't belong anywhere else. That your discipline has no place in ordinary life. Ethan exhaled. That was the lie he'd been living with. After the seminar ended, people filtered out slowly, conversations hushed, thoughtful. A woman approached Cole to thank him. A trainer asked about next week's session. Ethan stayed back. Cole waited until the room emptied, then walked over. You didn't interrupt, Cole said. That's progress. I wasn't ready to, Ethan replied. Cole nodded. You don't need to be ready to teach. You just need to stop hiding. Ethan looked around the room. They don't need what I know. They need exactly what you know, Cole said. Just not the way you learned it. Silence stretched, not uncomfortable this time. Ethan finally spoke. Last night, it scared me. How fast it came back. Cole's voice softened. It never left. That's what I'm afraid of. Cole shook his head. You're afraid of misusing it. That's different. Ethan considered that. For years, he'd treated his training like a sealed weapon, dangerous if exposed, better buried. But weapons weren't inherently destructive. Purpose determined outcome. So what? Ethan asked. I just integrate. Cole smiled faintly. You redefine. That afternoon, Ethan trained again, but differently. He moved through the gym with the same precision, the same awareness, but something had shifted. He corrected a beginner's stance when asked. He helped re-rack weights without scanning for threats. When Ryan passed by with his friends, there was no tension, just avoidance, mutual and quiet. No dominance. No submission. Just boundaries. Mark caught Ethan near the water fountain. You around tomorrow? He asked. Ethan nodded. Yeah. Mark hesitated. We're starting a basics class. Form. Breathing. Control stuff. Thought you might. I can help, Ethan said. Mark smiled, relieved. That'd be great. Later, as the gym lights dimmed and the evening crowd rolled in, Ethan finished his workout and stood still for a moment, hands on his hips. He wasn't waiting for conflict. He was present. As he left, the mirrors reflected a man who looked the same, but felt entirely different. Not softer. Not less capable. Just placed. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. People argued. People laughed. Life remained unpredictable. And Ethan knew now that unpredictability didn't require constant readiness for violence. It required awareness. It required restraint. It required knowing when strength was meant to stay invisible. That night, back in his apartment, Ethan opened a box he hadn't touched since leaving the service. Inside lay folded fabric, insignia, a past version of himself preserved in cotton and thread. He didn't put it on. He didn't throw it away. He folded it more neatly and placed it back. Some things weren't meant to be worn forever. They were meant to be carried forward, changed, translated, made useful again. Ethan turned off the light and stood by the window, watching the city glow. What he learned in uniform was never meant for a gym floor. Not as intimidation. Not as dominance. Not as spectacle. It was meant for moments no one applauded. For tensions diffused before they ignited. For strength applied without harm. For control chosen over chaos. And finally, Ethan understood. The uniform had taught him how to fight. Life had taught him when not to. And that lesson, at last, belonged exactly where he was.